So as we begin going over this mock draft, I want to go over what my initial plan was because I had the 10th pick in this mock draft. And I was contemplating doing a zero RB strategy. I kind of thought that it was possible that Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and Justin Jefferson, at least one of them, could still be available to pick 10. Because it depends on how people view the running backs. Because if we look at the first round before my pick, Jonathan Taylor went number 1. No surprise there, although I would be fine if McCaffrey was taken first overall, because when Chris McCaffrey is healthy, he's pretty much safe to get at least 20, 25 points a game. Dalvin Cook went number 2. A little bit of a surprise, but not completely surprising, as Dalvin Cook, I feel like, is a lock to be a top 5 pick in nearly 100% of actual fantasy drafts. McCaffrey went pick number 3. And I'm not surprised that Cooper Kupp is a top 5 pick, honestly. I would have been shocked if he was still on the board when it was close to my turn. But to be taken 4th overall, not surprising there. The furthest I see Cooper Kupp falling in fantasy drafts is probably pick 6 or 7 at the latest. The only way I could see him falling towards the end of the first round is if it's a 2 QB league or something, and how quarterbacks are scored in a league. If you're in one of those leagues that, scored your points differently. Like if quarterbacks have way more value than anybody else, then I can see why someone like Cooper Kupp could fall towards the end of that first round, because you want to get your Josh Allens and your Patrick Mahomes and your Justin Herbert. Austin Eckler went pick number 5. I could honestly see Eckler maybe in a top 3 pick in some mock drafts. Derrick Henry went pick number 6. He's coming off of an injury. Pick number 7, Devontae Adams, which Devontae Adams, this is kind of a reasonable spot for him, although I really could have thought it was possible he'd fall to me pick 10. That's honestly what I was banking on. And the fact that I saw Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson come off the board back to back, at that point, the zero RB strategy was out the window. Because those are the only 3 receivers, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, that I'm comfortable using a first-round pick on. And the fact that none of them were on the board when it came to my turn, I was going to draft who I felt like was the best running back available at the time. Nick Chubb went 9th before my pick. And with my first pick, the 10th overall pick, I went with Najee Harris for the Steelers. I just feel like Najee Harris, not only did I feel like he was the best available running back off the board, but I do think Najee Harris is going to be relied on heavily in the Steelers offense with a new quarterback, whether it's going to be Mitchell Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. I do think Najee Harris will be heavily relied on this season. And then right after me, to end the first round, Joe Mixon with pick number 11, and Jamar Chase went with the final pick in the first round with the 12th overall pick. And, of course, this is a snake draft, so the start of the second round, Travis Kelce comes off the board. Then DeAndre Swift, the second pick in the second round. And I had the third pick in the second round. And I went with Stephon Diggs for the Bills. I just think that Stephon Diggs, he had a fantastic season last year, but it wasn't as fantastic as the 2020 season. As there were some games that Stephon Diggs, he didn't live up to his fullest potential and the hype going into 2021. But I do like the targets that Stephon Diggs gets. I believe he's been the most targeted receiver in the last 3 years. Then after my pick, A.J. Brown, then Alvin Kamara went with the 5th pick of the second round, which you could say it's surprising considering there's a possibility that he could be suspended for up to 6 games. But in the live stream, Dalton, he said that he was relying on Kamara not being suspended at all. So if he doesn't get suspended at all, the fact he has Justin Jefferson and Kamara, and then we see him take Deebo Samuel the third in this with his third round pick, followed by Josh Jacobs. Those four right there. Championship contender right there. And then this is the part where I realized that Jacoby was going to pick all Raiders players because he's a Raiders fan. So at least at this point, I know I'm not going to have the worst mock draft, but at least it starts off reasonable with Devontae Adams. Then he takes Darren Waller in the second round, which I feel like that is a extreme reach, I think, especially with Waller getting taken over. Mark Andrews gets taken next, who is Lamar Jackson's security blanket, and over Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, CeeDee Lamb, Aaron Jones, Saquon Barkley, which I think even a second round pick is kind of risky on Saquon Barkley considering his injury history. I mean, McCaffrey, Barkley, both, injury history, but whenever they're healthy, they're extremely productive, especially McCaffrey. And the second round ends with Keenan Allen and Tyreek Hill going off the board. Now, I still think I came out with one of the better options for a wide receiver. I mean, I can get the argument for Tyreek Hill. I mean, even though he no longer has Patrick Mahomes and it's Tua Tagovailoa now, his career started off with game manager Alex Smith, and he was producing really solid numbers. But if I was kind of maybe towards the end of the second round, maybe I would have spent my second round pick on Tyreek Hill. Third round, this is where the quarterbacks start to come off the board. Josh Allen and Justin Herbert go off the board back to back. And this was the moment where I thought, okay, if Patrick Mahomes somehow falls to me with my third round pick, I'm going to go and take him. Then Kyle Pitts off the board, Javonte Williams off the board, which I'm a little bit surprised with considering that Melvin Gordon is still a part of the Broncos. And I kind of anticipate that they're going to stick with Melvin Gordon getting more of the carries where it's more of sharing carries. But I think Melvin Gordon ended up having the more of the carries by a 60 to 40%. So I expect some of the same. Then Breece Hall went off the board. Mike Evans went off the board. Hunter Renfrow went off the board. Then Deebo Samuel. Then Jalen Waddle. And then I end up taking Patrick Mahomes, which maybe was a mistake. But when I feel like you have the opportunity to take someone who could potentially be the best quarterback fantasy-wise, I feel like that's a good opportunity. Then Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette were selected at the end of the third round. Then the start of the fourth round, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin off the board. And then with my fourth round pick, I went with George Kittle for the 49ers. And George Kittle, despite missing a significant amount of the season last year, he still ended up being I believe it was the tight end 3 or tight end 4. I really thought about going wide receiver. Maybe now that I think about it more, I probably could have gone with Deontay Johnson, or I probably could have maybe reached a little bit by taking Michael Pittman, because I'm high on Michael Pittman this season with Matt Ryan at quarterback. But these first 4 picks, I think this team is looking pretty good, although maybe it could be better. You can argue that. Then T.J. Hawkinson comes off the board, followed by Josh Jacobs. Derek Carr comes off the board. Lamar Jackson, Deontay Johnson, Travis Etienne, who I think is poised for a good season after missing the entire year last year. Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, and James Conner round out round 4. And round 5 begins with Dalton Schultz, A.J. Dillon, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Elijah Mitchell, DJ Moore, Kenyon Drake, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers. I am surprised a little bit that Aaron Rodgers was taken after Joe Burrow. I mean, that's just me, but I feel like I probably would have went with Rodgers over Burrow. But at the same time, you got to think he doesn't have Devontae Adams anymore. He loses Valdez Scantling. Maybe it's just the fact that there's no, like, we don't know who the number one target's going to be in Green Bay, whether it could be Allen Lazard or Christian Watson or somebody completely that we don't even know. Maybe that had something to do with it. I'll have to maybe ask Dalton about that. Then in my 5th round pick, I went with David Montgomery for the Bears. I wanted to at least get a second running back by the 6th round, and David Montgomery was who I felt like was the best one available as far as, getting the majority of touches. Then Allen Robinson and Jalen Hurts round out the 5th round. Starting off the 6th round, Antonio Gibson went off the board, followed by Mike Williams. And then with my 6th round pick, I went with Michael Thomas for the Saints. And this one is kind of a high risk, high reward pick because Michael Thomas didn't play all year last year. Well, Michael Thomas is out there. He's going to be the number one target for Jameis Winston. And I get that he's known as Slant Boy, but guess what? When you're Slant Boy, you're going to get a lot of targets. And when you get a lot of targets, you're going to get a lot of catches. So I am completely relying on Michael Thomas coming back and playing the entire year this season. Then Chris Olave went off the board right after Michael Thomas. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then, the Raiders guy picked a Raiders player, of course. Then Adam Thielen went off the board, which I think this is pretty solid value for Adam Thielen to come off the board. I think this is somewhat of the right time. But Adam Thielen, he's in a way kind of touchdown dependent. So I think that's a reasonable spot for him. Then Knox went off the board for the Bills. Hollywood Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper. In the 6th round ended with Miles Sanders. Before I get to the 7th round, I do want to point out that picking Michael Thomas, I was down to Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, or Brandon Cooks. But I went with Michael Thomas, and I was trying to bank on at least Chris Godwin or Brandon Cooks coming right back around 2 with the 7th round pick, because that's what I would have used that's who I used my 2nd round pick on, was Godwin or Cooks. I know that Amon-Ra St. Brown, he really stepped up towards the end of the year. But I think for taking Amon-Ra St. Brown could be a risky pick, considering I think there's going to be a lot more mouths to feed in Detroit. But Chris Godwin went off the board with the first pick, the 7th round, then Kenneth Walker, then Amon-Ra St. Brown, then Brandon Cooks. So the gamble didn't pay off. Kareem Hunt went off the board, Rashad Bateman, then the Raiders picked Juju Smith-Schuster, Damian Harris. And then I went with Devontae Smith with my 7th round pick. Because despite being the number 2 option right now in Philadelphia, I still think he's going to have quite a bit of opportunities. And I think he's going to get a lot of targets. At least for wide receiver 2. Then DeAndre Hopkins went right after my pick, which I would have went with DeAndre Hopkins, but the 6-game suspension, plus I don't think my receiving core is necessarily strong enough, because my goal is to at least have 3, at least that I find like value, because I want to have a wide receiver at the flex. And Michael Thomas, I already felt like I was taking a risk by drafting him. I didn't want to take another one by taking Hopkins. Then Cortland Sutton ended the 7th round. Beginning the 8th round, Tony Pollard, Dak Prescott. Then I took Melvin Gordon with my 8th round pick because I just think that, as I said earlier, I just think Melvin Gordon's going to get the majority of the touches in Denver. Then Mike Gesicki, Dallas Goedert went the board. The Raiders pick Cordell Patterson. I thought maybe I could have gone with Cordell Patterson with my 8th round pick. That was maybe the one pick that I completely regret. Garrett Wilson, Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney, I think, is one of the few Bears players that are worth drafting, but I already drafted Dave Montgomery, and I'm not necessarily a fan of drafting a running back and a wide receiver on the same team. That's kind of just me. Because if they both have bad days, then the chances of you losing your matchup for the week, they go up. But, I mean, I get it. That's what you like to do, but that's something I'm not really a fan of necessarily, but I probably will do it on occasion, but rare. Kyler Murray, Drake London, and Gabriel Davis entered the 8th round. And I'm kind of surprised Gabriel Davis is kind of being drafted at this point because I think Gabriel Davis for an 8th round pick, I think that is a reach. I think the biggest reason why Gabriel Davis is, ADP or whatever they call that, why it's going up is mainly because of that divisional round game where he scored 4 touchdowns. I feel like without it, I don't think anybody's really talking about him. At least they're not talking about him as high as the 8th round. Starting in the 9th round, Tyler Lockett went off the board. And Tyler Lockett, I just feel like is too inconsistent for me. As there is one week where he can score about 20 plus points, and then another week he scores maybe 8. James Cook, the rookie running back for the Bills, that's a great pick right there by Joe Morley. But it seems like the Bills are pretty adamant on having their trust in Devin Singletary. But James Cook, I think, could be the RB1 in Buffalo at some point in the year. But I don't necessarily want to have James Cook on my roster if that moment doesn't come till like the end of the year. Unless I feel like I have a strong running back core, which at this point I probably could have done that since I have full trust in Najee Harris and David Montgomery. Then Treylon Burks, which I think Treylon Burks, I feel like he should be drafted a bit higher than a 9th round pick. I feel like if you get Burks after round 7, I think it's a steal because he's being criticized mainly for, having to take breaks during practice because he has asthma. But I think this is just another Jamar Chase kind of thing where a big problem they have with Jamar Chase is he couldn't catch the ball or something because the balls were different. But then Jamar Chase just had a phenomenal rookie year and was a part of a big reason why the Bengals made the Super Bowl. And I just think Burks is going to be another Jamar Chase kind of story where he's going to produce in his rookie season, make a big impact. Russell Wilson was taken with the 4th pick in the 9th round, followed by Christian Watson, Zach Ertz, Raiders pick, Brennan Ayuk. Devin Singletary was taken a few picks after James Cook. And with my 9th round pick, I went with Allen Lazard for the Packers. And I'm kind of making a risky pick here again because there's surely no answer to who the number 1 option is going to be in Green Bay, but I would lean that towards being Lazard simply because Aaron Rodgers has already had time to bond with him and trust him. As he's had his moments where he had big games, but they do say that it's really difficult for wide receiver 2s to instantly mesh into wide receiver 1 because you're going up against difficult corners. But I just think when you have a Hall of Famer quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, it's really worth taking that chance on Lazard, maybe playing more difficult corners. But Aaron Rodgers already has that trust with him. And the 9th round ends with Chase Edmonds and Elijah Moore. 10th round begins with Tom Brady. And that's a great pick, but he already took Jalen Hurts a couple of rounds before that. if this is a 2 quarterback league, this is an awesome move right there. But the fact only a 1 QB league, he's got to bench at least one of them. Christian Kirk, with my 10th round pick, I went with Alexander Madison for the Vikings. And this was a pick simply, I wanted to have at least one handcuff to one of the like star running backs. So I have the handcuff to Dalvin Cook. Matthew Stafford, the 4th pick in the 10th round, followed by Robert Woods. The Raiders picked Michael Carter. Isaiah Spiller, the rookie out of Texas A&M, which I think this is a smart move here by NFL Mike because he now has the handcuff to Austin Eckler. So if something happens to Austin Eckler, as Austin Eckler did miss one game last year with the illness that went around and that's still going around and will always go around. I just can't say it here. And he also missed a significant amount of time in 2020 due to injury. Rashad Penny, Chase Claypool, Tyler Boyd, and Pat Freiermuth rounded out round 10. Beginning round 11, James Robinson. As James Robinson, I'm kind of surprised that, the Jaguars went with Travis Etienne in the draft to begin with, because the 2 years that James Robinson has been a part of the Jaguars, he's the best player on their team. And the fact that, he's going to be likely an RB2, it's kind of asinine. Jarvis Landry, Sky Moore, the rookie for the Chiefs. I think Sky Moore, he's going to surprise people this year, and he's got the opportunity to do so. But if there's a rookie receiver that I can at least trust to at least potentially, finish as maybe a top 20 receiver, it'd be Sky Moore. Cole Kmet, Marlon Mack, Kadarius Toney, Raiders pick Ronald Jones, Van Jefferson. And I will say, I was going to go with Van Jefferson with my 11th round pick, but he was off the board before I went on the clock. But my 11th round pick, I went with Michael Gallup for the Cowboys. And I think I like this pick with Michael Gallup because he does move up on the depth chart. And I know he's playing more difficult corners, but CeeDee Lamb, I feel like could be a risky pick, at least a 2nd round pick. A 3rd round pick I'd be fine with because CeeDee Lamb's not going up against more difficult corners. So Michael Gallup, I think, is going to be the number 2 option behind CeeDee Lamb. I mean, Dalton Schultz is going to get his targets. I would not be surprised if Michael Gallup was a league winner this year. Then Pierce went off the board, then Stevenson for the Patriots. And starting the final round, Jameson Williams, Valdez Scantling. With my final pick, I went with Nyheim Hines for the Colts. And I'm just going to go through this last round, then talk about this. Chark, Lance, McCormick for the Raiders, Cousins, Winston, White for the Buccaneers, Gerald Everett, Hunter Henry, and Tua Tagovailoa was the final pick. So let's just review my draft here. I want to start at the end first. I have another handcuff to one of the top 5 picks. So if I had to grade this, I would honestly maybe give this a B- or a C+. And I'm not knocking myself. It's just that I felt like maybe there were some moves I could have made, some picks could have made that could have been better than what this looks like. Do I think I have the best mock here? No. I think maybe honestly I could be towards the middle of the pack, maybe middle of the pack, maybe somewhat towards the bottom. But the thing is, I have the handcuff to Dalvin Cook and Jonathan Taylor. If something were to happen to one or both of them, I could potentially be in the catbird seat if this was a real league. Or if I wanted to make a trade, I could potentially trade Stephon Diggs to maybe Saquon's Temple, maybe do a Stephon Diggs and Nyheim Hines for Tyreek Hill, as maybe that could be something he's open to because, you know, Nyheim Hines is the backup to Jonathan Taylor. And if something happens to Jonathan Taylor, then Hines is going to step up. Or maybe send an offer to Stephon Diggs and Alexander Madison to Joe Morley for maybe Keenan Allen. Or maybe a blockbuster trade and, maybe send over Mahomes and Diggs for Allen and Herbert and throw in Alexander Madison too. That could be something.